Welcome to Moonlit Romantic, where every story is a warm lantern glowing in the quiet night. Tonight, let the worries of your day drift away as we journey to Driftwood Cove, a quiet coastal town where secrets sleep in floorboards, love lingers in the wind, and one woman's return awakens memories and maybe a second chance. This is the Innkeeper's secret. So wrap yourself in a blanket, let the sea air in, and listen closely. Some love stories don't begin until you come home. Chapter 1. The Return. The wind hit her like a memory. It whipped across the bluff as Claire Delaney stepped out of her aging silver sedan, her boots crunching against the gravel of the overgrown drive. She tightened her coat around her waist, her hands trembling from more than the sea chill. The smell hit her next, brine and pine, salt and earth, the unmistakable scent of Driftwood Cove. It had been 20 years since she'd breathed it in. And just like that, the past crashed into her, full and unwelcome. Claire stared up at the weather-worn facade of her grandmother's inn, the Blue Heron. Peeling white paint, slumped eaves, and the once proud front porch now sagged under years of coastal wind and time. One shutter hung loose, slapping rhythmically against the frame as if the old house was sighing in grief or defiance. She dropped her keys into her purse and stood still for a moment, letting the quiet press in. No honking taxis, no subway rumbles, no deadlines, just the hush of pine trees and the distant caw of gulls. Claire hadn't wanted to come back. But her grandmother, Edith Delaney, had died 3 weeks ago in her sleep, leaving behind only a handwritten letter, the deed to the inn, and a box of lemon cookies Claire hadn't had the courage to open. And so here she was, divorced, jobless, and fraying at the seams, standing on the porch of a place she swore she'd never return to. The key stuck in the lock. Claire jiggled it, muttering under her breath, "Don't do this to me now." One hard twist later, the door creaked open. The smell hit her first, dust, salt, and that faint lavender that always clung to her grandmother's sweaters. The foyer stretched out before her, dim and faded, but otherwise untouched, like a memory preserved in cobwebs and sunlight. Her boots echoed on the hardwood floor as she walked in. The reception desk still held the tiny brass bell, and the faded guest book lay open as if waiting. She reached out to touch the edge of it, then thought better of it. There was no one here to check in anymore. Claire moved slowly from room to room, each step unearthing a dozen recollections, Christmases with too much cider, her mother's strained smiles, the summer she'd fallen off the porch railing, and Aiden had carried her to the dock. She paused in front of the grand staircase, where one baluster was still missing from that same long-ago fall. She closed her eyes and exhaled. "I'm not here for a nostalgia tour," she told the silence. "I'm here to fix you up and sell you." Her voice echoed dully off the walls. Claire pushed herself into motion. She had a to-do list. Get the heat working, hire a handyman, strip the peeling wallpaper in the guest rooms, pack up her grandmother's personal things, what little there were, and meet with a real estate agent next week. the faster she could make it marketable, the faster she could leave. The local hardware store was still in the same spot, down the street from the Lighthouse Cafe. Claire parked outside and tried to ignore the knot tightening in her stomach. Driftwood Cove was too small for anonymity. The bell over the door jingled as she stepped inside. It was cooler in the shop than she expected, and it smelled of cedar and oil and something citrusy. A young girl behind the counter, maybe high school age, looked up from her phone. "Hi," Claire said. "I need to post a help ad. I'm looking for a handyman." The girl popped her gum. "You at the old Heron place?" Claire blinked. Yes. I just inherited it." "Oh, that's wild. I thought it was gonna rot forever." "Charming. Well, I'd like to avoid that." "You probably want Aiden." Claire's stomach turned over. "I'm sorry, who?" "Aiden Holt. He's basically the only one in town who still does big repairs. Carpentry, plumbing, patching, whatever. He's kinda a grump, though." Claire's voice caught in her throat. Aiden Holt. The boy with storm gray eyes and calloused hands who used to draw maps in the sand with her. The boy she left without a goodbye when she boarded a bus to Boston. "That Aiden Holt?" The girl raised an eyebrow. "I guess. I mean, he's not in high school anymore, if that's what you're thinking." "Number I..." "Never mind. Do you have his number?" "He doesn't do phones much, but he'll probably be at the docks before noon. He does the maintenance for the ferry company, too." Claire nodded stiffly. "Thanks." As she stepped out of the store, the wind caught her hair and pulled it across her face. She closed her eyes for a second and cursed under her breath. Of course it would be Aiden. Of course, the only man who could fix the inn was the one she'd broken 2 decades ago. She found him on the dock at 11:43. Aiden stood with one boot planted on a coil of rope, his back turned to her, wrenching something into place on the side of the ferry gangway. The years had changed him, but not enough to erase the familiar lines of his shoulders or the way he wiped the sweat from his neck with the hem of his t-shirt. Claire stayed back for a moment, unsure how to breathe. He looked older, broader, weathered in the way only real life could carve someone, salt-stained and sun-touched, with a quiet gravity about him. His hair was longer now, dark with threads of silver. He turned as if he'd sensed her. The moment their eyes met, something shifted in the air, like the sea paused its rhythm just long enough to register the moment. Aiden's gaze darkened, his jaw tensed. "Well," he said flatly, "didn't expect to see you here." Claire lifted her chin, keeping her voice steady. "Hi, Aiden." There was a pause. He wiped his hands on a rag and nodded at the ferry. "You taking a boat out or just haunting the place?" She gave a tight smile. "Actually, I came to ask if you'd help me." He didn't answer, just looked at her with eyes that held 100 unsaid things. "I inherited the blue heron," she said. "I heard. I need to fix it up enough to sell." Aiden's expression didn't change. you always did like quick exits. She winced. Look, I'm not here to drag up the past. I need a handyman, and they said you were the best in town. He gave a half laugh, but it held no humor. Driftwood Cove isn't exactly brimming with competition. So will you do it? Aiden stepped off the coil of rope, slowly approaching. For a moment, Claire thought he might say something biting or walk away. Instead, he studied her, really studied her. I'll look at the place. No promises. That's fine. He paused at the edge of her space, his voice low. But I'm not doing this for you, Claire. I'm doing it because your grandmother meant something to this town, and to me. Claire swallowed. Understood. He walked past her, and for a second she caught the scent of cedar and old pine. The air felt heavier somehow, like the tide had come in. Claire exhaled slowly, watching him disappear down the dock. Driftwood Cove wasn't going to be a quick pit stop after all. Not with ghosts in every hallway. And one walking, breathing reminder of the life she left behind. Chapter 2. The Handyman. By the time Aiden pulled his dusty black pickup into the inn's driveway the next morning, Claire had already been up for hours. She'd spent the night in the smallest guest room, where the mattress was firm enough to bruise and the wind howled through cracks in the window panes. Her grandmother's old quilt, still smelling faintly of lavender and sea air, had offered the only comfort. Now, dressed in jeans and a worn flannel she'd found in one of the closets, Claire stood on the porch holding 2 mugs of coffee, unsure whether to greet him like an old friend or a cautious stranger. Aiden killed the engine, stepped out, and gave the inn a long, unreadable look before turning to her. "You've got a raccoon nest in the attic," he said, by way of hello. Claire blinked. "Excuse me?" He nodded toward the eaves. "Saw them climbing out last night when I drove by. Probably 4 or 5. You'll need to trap them out before they start chewing through wiring." She handed him the extra mug without thinking. "Good morning to you, too." He took it, eyed her warily, then took a sip. "Coffee's not bad," he said gruffly. Claire almost smiled. "I learned how to brew something decent after my ex decided he only liked triple macchiatos with coconut foam and emotional detachment." Aiden quirked a brow. "Still bitter, huh?" "Only about the foam." They stood in awkward silence for a beat, the ocean wind tugging at Claire's hair and Aiden's flannel sleeves. He cleared his throat. "Show me the damage." She led him inside, cringing slightly as he stepped over the warped floorboards and ducked under the low hallway arch she'd always hit her head on as a teenager. He walked slowly, methodically, like a man surveying a battlefield. "Needs new windows," he muttered. "That front step's going to collapse if someone sneezes. Plumbing's probably rusted. Electrical, we'll see." "I wasn't expecting miracles," she said. "No, but you should expect mice." Claire winced. "Seriously?" Seriously. They moved from room to room. Guest suites with frayed curtains and faded wallpaper. The sunroom with its sagging wicker furniture. The kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon and forgotten dinners. In the dining room, Aiden paused at the hearth. A line of photos in old frames still rested on the mantel. Guests from decades past, her grandmother in her younger days, Claire's high school graduation picture tucked behind a glass vase. "Your grandmother ever mentioned selling?" he asked quietly. Claire shook her head. She always said the inn would outlive her. Looks like she was right. Aiden crouched beside the baseboard and poked it with a screwdriver. A puff of dust exploded into the air. She loved this place, Claire said softly. She did, he agreed. She loved this town, too. Stayed when a lot of us wanted to leave. Claire crossed her arms. Some of us did leave. He stood and met her gaze. Yeah, you did. There it was again. That sting beneath the surface. The things unsaid. The past thick between them, like a fog. She turned away. "You'll take the job?" Aiden hesitated. "I'll need a few days to draw up a list. Prioritize the big stuff first. Stairs, electrical, mold check. I'll do what I can myself. But for roofing or asbestos, you'll need specialists." "That's fine." "Don't expect me to coddle the walls. Or you." Claire narrowed her eyes. "Wasn't planning on it." He gave a curt nod. "I'll be back tomorrow with tools." Then he walked out the way he came, quiet, steady, unshaken. Claire stood in the foyer, long after his truck disappeared down the drive. The inn was full of holes, but it was the silence between her and Aiden that felt the most fragile of all. By the end of the week, the foyer was covered in plastic sheeting. 2 guest rooms had been stripped to the studs, and the porch railing had been replaced with fresh pine. Aiden worked like a machine. No small talk, no questions, just hours of hammering, sawing, and precise repairs that transformed creaking corners into sturdy ones. He brought his own tools, his own lunch, and made no attempt to linger longer than necessary. Claire, to her own surprise, found herself keeping pace. She pulled nails, stripped wallpaper, swept sawdust, and fixed herself stiff cups of coffee when the air got too heavy. They fell into a rhythm of sorts, parallel lines, orbiting the same space, but never quite intersecting. Until Thursday. That morning, Claire was digging through the linen closet on the 2nd floor when something wedged behind the shelf fell out and clattered to the floor. She bent down and picked it up, a yellowing envelope, sealed with a faded wax stamp. The handwriting was unmistakable, her grandmother's. To be opened by Claire only. Heart pounding, she slipped it into her sweater and ducked into the old reading nook at the end of the hall. She sat cross-legged on the dusty cushion and unfolded the letter with trembling fingers. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone, and you've come back to the inn. Though I imagine it wasn't by choice. There's something I never told your mother, never told anyone. You may find more letters hidden around this house. Don't throw them away. They're pieces of a story I could never bear to speak aloud. And if you find the photograph behind the pantry shelf, well, you'll know. All my love always, Edith. Claire read it twice, then a third time. What photograph? Her grandmother had always been warm, steady, practical. She'd never hinted at secrets, never even implied that anything had been left unsaid. But this letter, it left Claire shaken in a way the repairs hadn't. She tucked the letter into her pocket, stood slowly, and walked downstairs. In the kitchen, Aiden was replacing cabinet hinges with a quiet focus that bordered on meditative. Claire watched him for a second, then stepped into the pantry. "Something wrong?" he called, glancing over his shoulder. "Nope," she lied. "Just hungry." She closed the pantry door behind her and began running her fingers along the back wall. Nothing. She crouched, examined the lowest shelf, then reached up behind the highest. Her fingers brushed paper. She tugged gently and pulled out an envelope, thicker than the last, with 2 black and white photographs tucked inside. One was of her grandmother, laughing on the beach beside a man Claire didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and handsome in a quiet, rugged way, like someone who belonged in a lighthouse, more than a photograph. The second photo was torn, clearly cut from a larger one. It showed just the man's hands clasping Edith's. A wedding band gleamed on his finger. Claire sat down hard on the floor. Her grandmother had had an affair. Maybe more than an affair. And she'd hidden it in the walls of this inn. Claire stared at the photos for a long minute. Then, without fully thinking it through, she stepped back into the kitchen and held them out. "Aiden," she said softly. He took them, brows furrowing as he looked. "That's Edith." "I know." "Who's the guy?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But she left me a letter. Said there might be more." Aiden exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. Edith was private. She didn't even tell people she was sick. "She told me everything," Claire whispered. "Or I thought she did." He studied the photo again. "That's the beach near Shipwreck Point. No one really goes there anymore." Claire looked at him. "Will you come with me tomorrow?" He hesitated. "Why?" "Because she left these for me to find. Because I can't do this alone. And maybe," she faltered, "maybe I don't want to anymore." Aiden was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded once. "I'll bring coffee." That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She stood by the window in the guest room, watching the moonlit waves roll in and out, just like they always had. Below, the inn creaked softly. Old wood shifting, secrets murmuring just out of reach. She reached into her pocket and reread her grandmother's letter again, fingers tracing the edges. Tomorrow, she'd walk the beach with Aiden. Tomorrow, she might find another piece of the past, but tonight, she let the wind carry her into sleep. And somewhere in the back of her dreams, she saw a woman on the beach, reaching out to a man whose name she'd never known. Chapter 3: Cracked Walls, Cracked Hearts. The beach near Shipwreck Point wasn't listed on any tourist maps. Locals called it Widow's Reach, a crescent of dark gray sand, hemmed in by jagged cliffs and twisted driftwood. The surf was rough, the rocks treacherous. Even in summer, it remained empty. Claire hadn't set foot on it in 20 years. The morning air was sharp and heavy with salt when she and Aiden pulled off the coastal road and hiked the half-mile path through cedar and fog. Neither of them spoke much. She carried a small thermos of coffee. He brought a flashlight, a shovel, and a folding knife because, as he said, just in case the past bites back. By the time they reached the sand, the sun had broken faintly through the clouds. The tide was low, the beach quiet, save for the rhythm of water licking the shore. Claire stood staring at the horizon. I used to think this place looked like the edge of the world. Aiden adjusted the strap of his canvas bag. Edith brought you here? She used to say the wildest things washed up on this beach. Sea glass, old letters in bottles. Once she swore a compass came ashore that pointed only west. Aiden gave a soft grunt. Wouldn't put it past her. Claire moved across the sand, eyes searching the terrain, as if the wind might lift a curtain and reveal her grandmother's secret. It wasn't long before she found it. Tucked behind a curtain of wind-polished seagrass was a hollow in the cliffside, a crevice barely wide enough to fit through. Inside, the rock walls were black and damp, covered in lichen. Aiden held up the flashlight. Claire stepped in and inhaled the scent of stone and old salt. Near the back of the hollow, half buried under rocks, was a rusted metal box. Claire's pulse kicked. She crouched and began clearing away debris. Aiden knelt beside her. Careful. The box was heavy, crusted with age. Aiden pried it open with his knife. Inside, another envelope, yellowed but sealed. A small notebook, bound with twine, and a locket. Claire lifted the locket first. Inside was a faded photo of her grandmother, much younger, laughing, and that same mystery man from the photograph they'd found earlier. The letter bore her grandmother's handwriting again. Claire, if you found this, then you're not running anymore. That matters more to me than anything. This man, his name was Daniel Whitaker. And what we had, it wasn't something I could explain to your mother, or the town, or anyone. I loved him. Even though he was married, even though it was wrong. There's more in the journal. But understand this, love is rarely clean. And sometimes the heart doesn't ask permission. I only hope you can forgive me. And maybe In learning this, forgive yourself a little too. Edith. Claire's throat closed. She opened the journal and flipped through the first few pages. Snippets, poems, observations from long walks, short notes, like Daniel came again today. He brought clams and made me laugh until I cried. She sat back on the sand, stunned. Aiden said nothing at first. Then, gently, she really did love him. Claire nodded, and she never told anyone. She told you, eventually. They sat in silence, listening to the surf. Finally, Claire whispered, I wonder if she was lonely, keeping all this inside. She had this place, Aiden said. She had you. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she stood and brushed off her jeans. Let's take it back. I want to read more. Aiden nodded, helping her gather the items. As they stepped back into the light, Claire glanced at him. Thank you for coming. He didn't look at her. I said I would. Still, something in his voice was softer than before. Back at the inn, the work resumed, but something had shifted. They spoke more now. Not much, but enough. Aiden told her about his father's slow decline, how he'd passed 3 years ago, about staying in Driftwood Cove to care for him, about running his own repair business, modest but steady. Claire shared pieces of her own collapse, the long hours in marketing, the ambition that burned her out, the betrayal of her ex-husband with a coworker half his age, the city that stopped feeling like possibility and turned into a maze of numb routine. One evening, as twilight settled in, Claire stood on a ladder, peeling wallpaper in the master suite. Aiden worked beside her, patching a ceiling leak. This room used to terrify me as a kid, she said. The wallpaper peeled even back then. I used to think ghosts lived behind it. Aiden smirked. If they did, they've got asbestos poisoning by now. She laughed. Do you believe in ghosts? He paused, hammer in hand. I believe places remember. Emotions leave marks, not always ones you can see. Claire stopped scraping. That's beautiful, she said. He looked up at her. Your leaving left a mark. The words hit like a sudden wind. Claire swallowed. Aiden. I waited, he said quietly. You said you'd call. You never did. She climbed down from the ladder, hands trembling. I couldn't. I thought if I looked back, I'd lose my nerve. You broke mine, he said. Silence. The peeling walls bore witness to their standoff. Claire stepped closer. I thought I was doing what I had to. I wanted something bigger than this town. And did you get it? She hesitated. For a while. He studied her face. Then what? I lost myself. Aiden didn't answer, just turned back to his work. But his jaw wasn't as tight anymore. And when he left that night, he said, "See you in the morning," without bitterness. That weekend, Claire found a second letter tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the upstairs hallway. Another note from her grandmother, this one dated 5 years before Edith's death. "I used to wonder what would have happened if I'd left town with Daniel. But some things aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to be remembered. You don't have to follow my path, Claire, but maybe the right path for you isn't as far away as you think." Claire pressed her palm to the letter, heart aching. She wasn't sure if Edith had hidden these things out of shame, fear, or hope. But she knew one thing now. Her grandmother had loved more deeply than anyone realized. And perhaps in her own way, she'd left these breadcrumbs for Claire to follow. Not just to understand her, but to forgive herself too. That night, the power cut out during a late spring storm. Claire and Aiden sat in the inn's parlor, drinking wine by candlelight, listening to the rain hammer the roof. "You still hate storms?" he asked. Claire smiled faintly. "I used to. Not anymore. They feel honest." Aiden tilted his head. "You were always braver than you thought." "No," she said. "I was terrified. I just pretended not to be." He looked at her, candlelight flickering in his eyes. "You're still pretending?" Claire met his gaze. "Number not anymore." A long silence stretched between them, thick with memory and something new. Aiden leaned forward. "I still don't know why you didn't say goodbye." She looked down. "Because it was easier to leave angry than broken. And I was already breaking." "You think I wasn't?" Her breath caught. Aiden leaned back again, voice low. "The night you left, I stood on that bluff for 2 hours, just staring at the road. I thought maybe you'd change your mind." Claire's eyes filled. "I'm sorry." He didn't speak. She reached across the space and touched his hand. He led her. And for the first time since she returned, the silence between them felt like something waiting to be filled, not something left behind. Chapter 4. Letters in the Floorboards. The rain continued through the night, blanketing Driftwood Cove in a soft gray hush. By morning, the clouds still hung low, but the worst of the storm had passed, leaving the world damp and gleaming. Claire padded barefoot through the parlor, coffee in hand, the scent of damp wood thick in the air. Rain tapped lightly on the windows. Aiden's tools sat on the covered porch, untouched for now. He hadn't come yet. She didn't mind the quiet. Not this morning. Not after last night. They hadn't kissed, hadn't even hugged. But something had cracked open between them like a sealed door giving way after years of pressure. Aiden had let her touch his hand. He hadn't pulled away, and that somehow meant more than words. Claire took her coffee into the upstairs hallway and stood staring down the corridor. The wallpaper was half peeled. Paint chips scattered the floor. At the end of the hall, near the linen closet, the floor dipped unevenly, an old flaw in the boards they'd never fixed. she stepped toward it, the loose plank groaned beneath her foot. She knelt, pried it up, and found, just as she'd begun to expect, another envelope. Claire's hands trembled as she opened it. Claire, I never meant for my life to become a secret. But I was 23 when I met Daniel, and I had just lost everything. My brother to the war, my mother to illness, my home to foreclosure. Daniel was kind, quiet, married, yes, but unhappy. His wife had left him in everything but name. I didn't ask for him. I didn't chase him. But he saw me, and once you've been truly seen, it's hard to go back. I know you know what I mean. Edith. Claire sank back onto her heels, heart pounding. It wasn't just about Edith anymore. It was about her too. Because that line, once you've been truly seen, echoed inside her like a bell. Aiden had seen her, long before she saw herself, and she'd run from that too. Aiden arrived an hour later, soaked and cursing softly at the damp supplies in his truck bed. Claire met him on the porch with a towel and a quiet smile. "You're late," she teased. "Storm downed a tree on Pelican Road," he grumbled, rubbing rain from his hair. "Had to go around. Coffee's hot." He looked at her carefully, the way he had the first day, assessing, cautious. But this time there was no resentment, only a wariness born of history. "Thanks," he said. He followed her inside. They drank coffee in the kitchen. Claire watched the steam rise from her mug and finally said, "I found another letter." Aiden looked up. "Where?" "Under the hall floorboard." She wrote about Daniel again, about being seen. His jaw flexed. Claire continued, "I think she kept writing them for me, not just to confess, but to guide me." Aiden leaned back in his chair. "She knew you'd come back eventually." "I didn't. Maybe part of you did." Claire hesitated. "Do you ever wonder who you'd be if I hadn't left?" Aiden looked at her for a long time. "Sometimes. But I wonder more who you would have been if you'd stayed." Claire swallowed. "I wouldn't have been ready for you then." "I wasn't asking for ready," he said gently. "Just honest." They stared at each other for a moment, the weight of it pressing in. Then Aiden stood. "Come on, help me pull out the baseboards in the sunroom." Claire blinked. "Why?" "Because if your grandmother hid one letter under a floorboard, she might have hidden more." She followed him through the house, grateful for the distraction, and the way his presence steadied her now, instead of making her ache. They found the next letter beneath the floor vent in the sunroom, tucked inside a mason jar, dry as dust. "Claire, the world tried to make me quiet, to tell me who I could love and what I should accept. But love isn't about rules. It's about moments. I had 100 small moments with Daniel, that made up a life, though no one else ever saw them. A laugh on a foggy beach, his coat wrapped around my shoulders during a storm, a kiss behind the pantry door. They were ours. That was enough. Claire read it twice, then passed it to Aiden without a word. He read it, then handed it back with a quiet, "Your grandmother was braver than most." Claire smiled faintly. She always told me not to settle for a life that looked good on paper, but felt hollow when the lights were out. Aiden met her gaze. "Did you?" "Settle?" She shrugged. "At the time, I thought I was reaching higher, chasing dreams." "Maybe you were," he said. "But dreams don't mean much if they cost everything real." Claire looked away. "I used to think leaving here was the only way I'd matter." "And now?" She thought about the letters, the inn, the feel of salt in her lungs, and Aiden's quiet steadiness. Now I think maybe I didn't understand what mattering meant. Later that afternoon, while Claire was sanding the guest room windowsills and Aiden was checking water damage in the basement, she found something else. In the old sewing room closet, a place Claire hadn't dared enter since childhood, was a small lacquered box. Inside, a dried corsage, 2 old ferry tickets, and a folded page torn from a calendar. The date was circled in red, June 17th, 1964. Claire brought it to Aiden in the kitchen. He studied the tickets. "They're for the Harborview ferry line, only used to run once a week." Claire tapped the calendar. This was a Wednesday. That's the day she said goodbye to him, he guessed. Claire nodded. Maybe they planned to leave together. Maybe he didn't show. Or maybe she didn't. They sat quietly for a long while. Finally, Claire said, "There's one room we haven't touched." Aiden looked at her. "Which one?" "My grandmother's." The door to Edith's room was exactly as Claire remembered, painted seafoam green, with the glass doorknob warm from afternoon sun. Inside, the room smelled of lavender and linen and the faintest trace of old rose perfume. The bed was still made. The curtains were sheer, blowing gently in the breeze. The vanity held a cracked powder compact, a silver comb, and a photo of Claire at age 10, missing 2 front teeth. Claire moved slowly, reverently, as if the room might breathe if she startled it. Aiden stood in the doorway, silent. Claire turned to him. She wrote all these letters, left these clues, but she never said why. Aiden stepped inside, his voice soft. Maybe it wasn't about the why. Maybe it was about the who. Claire frowned. "She wanted you to see her," Aiden said. "All of her. Not just the version the town knew. Not just Grandma Edith, keeper of the blue heron." Claire stared at the picture frame, eyes stinging. "She always saw me, even when I didn't deserve it." "Maybe she was hoping you'd come back," when you were ready to see her. Claire crossed to the dresser, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a bundle wrapped in a scarf. Inside was one final letter. Claire, if you're holding this, you've seen enough to know the truth. Not everything is perfect. Not every love story ends the way we want. But you are not broken because of what you wanted. You are worthy of love, of joy, of being seen. Don't let the world talk you out of that. I didn't tell your mother, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want her to carry my grief. You, my darling girl, I always believed you'd find your way. Just remember, the inn isn't just walls and rooms. It's a heart. And it's beating because you came back. Edith. Claire folded the letter against her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. She turned and looked at Aiden, her voice catching. I don't know if I'm ready. For what? For staying. He walked over and took the letter from her gently, set it down, and placed his hand over hers. You don't have to be ready, he said. You just have to want to try. The air between them stilled. Claire looked up into his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, didn't look away. Aiden's hand rose to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. And then, quietly, simply, he kissed her. Chapter 5. Storms inside and out. The first thunderclap cracked through the sky just after dusk. Claire stood on the back porch watching dark clouds pile high over the ocean. The wind was shifting, smelling sharply of salt and ozone, and the horizon had turned a bruised gray blue. Somewhere out on the water, gulls wheeled and cried, uneasy. Aiden emerged from the side of the inn, wiping his hands on a rag. Storms coming fast. Claire glanced at him. Is it always this sudden? Coastal storms are like that. Sneak up when you're looking the other way. He squinted at the clouds. Power'll probably go out. Claire gave a tired smile. It already did once this week. I'm practically an expert now. Aiden smirked. I'll prep the generator. As he disappeared inside, Claire turned her eyes back to the sea. The blue heron creaked behind her, old wood bracing for another blow. The inn had survived dozens of storms, likely more. She wondered how many her grandmother had endured alone in this house, listening to the wind rattle the windows and the walls whisper. She wondered if Aiden had ever sat on this porch years ago, looking out and wondering about her. And she wondered why, after all this time, after the silence, the heartbreak, the distance, it still felt like he was the safest place she'd ever stood. The wind tugged at her hair. Thunder rolled again, louder this time. She turned back inside, just as the first heavy drops began to fall. By the time the rain began in earnest, the inn had darkened with the weight of the storm. Aiden had managed to get the generator running, supplying partial light to the main rooms. but the upstairs remained cloaked in shadows. Claire lit candles and carried a few into the parlor. The old fireplace sat cold and empty. She turned to Aiden as he came in, hair damp, sleeves rolled. "Do you think it still works?" He followed her gaze to the hearth. Only one way to find out. Together, they gathered kindling and the few remaining logs stacked near the cellar. Aiden struck the match and carefully fed the fire to life. Slowly, it caught and grew, casting flickering warmth across the parlor walls. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, the fire at her back. Aiden lowered himself beside her. Outside, the storm surged. Inside, the silence felt charged. She glanced sideways at him. "Do you remember the last storm we sat through together?" Aiden's lips curved faintly. "Sophomore year. Your parents were away. You snuck me into the sunroom, and we watched the lightning from under that awful floral blanket." Claire laughed. "We spilled grape soda on it. My mother thought it was a ghost stain." "She always did hate me." Claire sobered. "She didn't hate you. She hated that I was happier with you than I ever was in her world." Aiden looked into the fire. "She was right to be angry. I didn't have much to offer you back then. You offered me everything I needed." His voice was low. "And you left anyway." Claire turned to face him fully. "I know, and I won't ask you to forget that." Aiden looked at her then, really looked, and something in his gaze cracked. "I wanted you to fight for me," he said. "I waited for a letter, a phone call, anything." "I was ashamed," Claire whispered. "I thought I had to prove something, that I wasn't just the girl from Driftwood Cove who stayed behind." Aiden's voice was barely audible. "You left before I could even ask you to stay." Claire's throat tightened. "Would you have?" "Yes." The word came out like breath, immediate and raw. In a heartbeat. The rain lashed against the windows, the wind howling down the chimney. Claire shivered. Aiden shifted closer, his shoulder brushing hers. "This place," he murmured, "it's still full of you, even before you came back." She met his eyes. "And you? Were you full of me too?" He exhaled. "I tried not to be." Claire's hand reached for his, their fingers brushing. For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm roared, then, slowly, deliberately, Aiden turned and kissed her. Not like the soft, tentative brush on the cheek from a few nights ago. Not like the memory of first love. This kiss was older, wiser, full of ache and consequence. Claire leaned into him, heart pounding, hands curling into his shirt. Her body remembered his, the way he once held her behind the bleachers, the summer kisses by the dock, the firefly-lit nights of everything unsaid. When they pulled apart, their foreheads touched. Aiden spoke first. I'm not the same boy you knew. Claire nodded. And I'm not the same girl. He studied her face. Do you still want to leave? She paused. I don't know what I want. Not yet. But for the first time in years, I want to want something real. Aiden gave a soft laugh. That's a start. They slept in separate rooms that night. But Claire lay awake long after the storm passed, watching shadows flicker on the ceiling. She kept seeing Edith's letters in her mind, those fragile confessions tucked into walls and floors. Her grandmother hadn't asked for forgiveness. She'd asked to be known. And maybe, Claire thought, that was all anyone really wanted. To be known, to be seen, to be loved, even in the places no one else had ever looked. She rose quietly, padded downstairs, and slipped into the parlor. The fire had gone out. Only a faint orange glow remained in the coals. She sat on the rug, arms wrapped around her knees, and whispered into the silence, I think I'm still in love with him. And the inn, old and quiet, seemed to hear her. The next morning, the storm had blown out to sea. Aiden was already on the ladder outside, repairing the broken eave over the porch. Claire stood beside him with a toolbox, handing up nails, pretending not to stare at the way the sunlight hit his shoulders. You look tired, he said, without turning around. Claire smirked. Says the man who rebuilt a chimney in a hurricane. He grunted. Fair. She hesitated. About last night. Aiden looked down. Claire pressed on. I meant it. All of it. I know, but I still don't know where I'm going after this. He climbed down the ladder, brushing off his jeans. That's okay, he said. Just don't run again. Claire reached for his hand. I'm tired of running, she said. Aiden's fingers closed over hers, strong and steady. And for the first time since she'd come home, Claire felt still. Chapter 6. A Town of Secrets. Claire hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She was at the Driftwood Cove General Store, halfway down the canned goods aisle, comparing prices on coffee when she heard her name. Swear I saw her come out of the inn with him yesterday. The voice was unmistakable. Gwen Mallory, town gossip, and lifelong member of the Driftwood Cove Beautification Committee. Another voice chimed in, lower, older. Edith's granddaughter. She's with Aiden now. Claire froze, half shielded by a shelf of lentils. Mm-hmm, Gwen said, and Claire could almost hear the smirk. Just like old times, isn't it? Can't say I'm surprised. She always had a wild streak. Ran off in the middle of the night, didn't she? She did. Broke that poor boy's heart. Well, maybe she's back to patch it up. Or tear it open again, Claire thought, her stomach twisting. She waited until the cartwheels squeaked away before emerging, cheeks hot. Back in high school, She'd thought the town's whispers couldn't touch her. But she wasn't 17 anymore. She was 38, tired, carrying 2 decades of regret in her luggage. She paid for her coffee, ignored Gwen's faux sweet smile at the register, and walked straight out into the sunshine. Back at the inn, Aiden was pulling weeds from the front garden bed, his sleeves rolled up and forearms dusted with soil. Claire crossed her arms. "I'm a scandal again." He didn't look up. That was fast. "I heard Gwen Mallory talking about us in this store." Gwen talks about everyone. Last month, she accused the librarian of hosting tarot nights. Claire groaned. "This is why I left." Aiden straightened, stretching his back. Because Gwen Mallory can't keep a secret. Because this town sees everything and remembers everything. He wiped sweat from his brow. "They'll talk. That's what people do." "And you don't care?" "I didn't care when I was 17. He looked at her. "I care even less now." Claire wanted to believe that. She really did. But her nerves still buzzed. Aiden walked over and pulled off his gloves. "You want them to forget? Give them something else to talk about." She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He leaned in, his voice low. "Like how we're fixing up this inn. How we're making something whole again." Claire's breath hitched. "And," he added with a small smile, "maybe how the girl who left finally came home." That afternoon, Claire dug through the attic. Looking for an old storage trunk she vaguely remembered from childhood. The attic smelled of dust, cedar, and thyme. Light filtered through a round porthole window, illuminating boxes labeled Xmas 1974 kitchen linens, and one simply marked "Do not open." Naturally, she opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, yellowed photographs, and an old Driftwood Cove High School yearbook. She flipped it open. Her picture, Claire Delaney, 1999, voted most likely to succeed, smiled back at her in awkward confidence. Next to it, Aiden Holt, most likely to fix anything. She traced his face with her fingertip. They'd been inseparable once, before ambition drowned her, before fear pushed her onto that bus. Beneath the yearbook, she found a sealed envelope marked Daniel W., final letter, unsent. Her breath caught. She opened it with shaking hands. "Daniel, I waited for you on the dock. I waited with my bag packed and the ferry ticket in my hand. You didn't come. Maybe you changed your mind. Maybe you never intended to leave at all. Either way, I won't chase what doesn't want to be caught. I loved you. I still do. But I won't wait anymore. Goodbye." Claire sat on the attic floor, stunned. He hadn't come. Her grandmother had stood at the edge of everything she knew, willing to leap, and Daniel never showed. Claire clutched the letter, feeling her heart tighten. So Edith had stayed, built a life here, alone, but on her own terms, Claire didn't know whether to feel heartbreak or awe. Maybe both. She returned the letter to its box, then sat staring out the round window for a long time. Downstairs, the mail had come. Among the usual flyers and bills was a note from the Driftwood Cove Historical Society. Claire opened it. Miss Delaney, we would like to formally request access to your grandmother's personal collection. Should any historical materials be found within the Blue Heron Inn. As you know, Edith Delaney was one of the founding members of our preservation efforts. Her life and connection to this town's lesser-known stories are of considerable interest. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Martin Clemens, President, Driftwood Cove Historical Society. Claire's skin prickled. They knew something, or suspected. She read the letter again. Lesser-known stories. Did that mean Edith and Daniel's affair wasn't as secret as Claire thought? She glanced toward the parlor, where the fire had burned days earlier. The locket still sat on the mantel beside the faded photograph. If the Historical Society wanted her grandmother's secrets, what would they do with them? Rewrite her legacy? Distort it? Claire paced the hall, anxiety building. Then she picked up the phone and called them. The Historical Society sat in a converted church near the harbor, complete with creaky floors and the scent of old paper. Martin Clemens, thin and gray-bearded, with owlish glasses, greeted her at the door. Ms. Delaney, thank you for coming. Claire shook his hand warily. What exactly are you looking for? He motioned toward a table covered in folders. Anything of significance, diaries, letters, photographs. Your grandmother was deeply involved in civic life. We're preparing an exhibit on local women who shaped the cove's culture. Claire sat slowly. And what exactly do you already know? Martin smiled politely. We know she helped host charity events, ran this town's first literacy initiative, and, he lowered his voice slightly, we believe she may have had a connection to a man named Daniel Whitaker. Claire stilled. You believe? Martin nodded. Daniel's name appears in some private correspondence from the 1960s. One letter mentions a woman on the cliffs. Descriptions match your grandmother. Claire folded her arms. And if I said I had some of that correspondence? He hesitated. We'd be grateful for the opportunity to include it. Truth matters, even the complicated kind. Claire stood. So does respect. Martin rose as well. Agreed. She gave him a curt nod. I'll think about it. And she left. Back at the inn, Aiden was in the kitchen, sanding the pantry shelves. Claire dropped the mail on the counter and said, They know. He looked up. Who? The Historical Society. About Daniel. About Edith. Aiden wiped his hands. You tell them anything? No. She poured herself a glass of water. But I don't know if I should. He leaned against the counter. What do you want to protect? Her reputation or her truth? Claire stared into her glass. Both. Aiden nodded. Then tell her story, on your terms. Claire blinked. You think I should give them the letters? I think she left them for you, to do something with, whether that's share them or bury them again. She moved to the pantry, brushed her hand along the freshly sanded shelf. She stood on the dock and waited for a man who never came. She was brave, Aiden said, even when she broke. Claire turned, eyes shining. So were you, back then. Aiden gave a soft smile. I was stupid. You waited. He reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear. So did you. Claire didn't move. I'm still here, he said quietly. She stepped into his arms and laid her head against his chest. Outside, the town kept whispering, but in the kitchen of the Blue Heron Inn, something steadier bloomed. Chapter 7. Second Chances and Setbacks. The phone rang just after sunrise. Claire, still groggy and wrapped in a blanket, shuffled down the hall, barefoot to answer it. Blue Heron Inn, she said automatically, before remembering it wasn't open for business anymore. A hesitant voice replied, Claire, it's Lydia. Claire blinked. Lydia? Her cousin? Her mother's sister's daughter. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the funeral. Yeah, I heard you were fixing up the inn. Thought I'd call. Claire sat on the edge of the couch. That's unexpected. A pause. I always loved that place, Lydia said softly. Aunt Edith used to let me stay in the Rose Room when I was little. Said it was a sanctuary for girls who felt too much. Claire smiled faintly. She said that to me too. I was wondering, Lydia continued, if you'd be okay with me coming to see it. Maybe help out. Claire hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't want family here, but her relationship with Lydia was fraught. They'd once been close, but time and silence had a way of warping old affection into brittle discomfort. Still, sure, Claire said at last. If you're willing to get your hands dirty. Lydia laughed. Always. By the time Aiden arrived that morning, Claire had already cleared the front porch, reorganized the paint supplies, and prepared a fresh pot of coffee. He stepped onto the porch with a cautious smile. You're up early. Family's coming. He raised a brow. Yours? My cousin, Lydia. She wants to help. He took the coffee she offered him. That a good thing? Claire shrugged. TBD. They drank in silence for a minute. Then Claire said, I've been thinking about the letters. Aiden glanced at her. Yeah? I think I'm going to let the Historical Society have copies, not the originals. He nodded slowly. Good choice. I wanted people to know who she was, but I want to keep her voice close. Aiden looked out over the railing, toward the fog rolling off the sea. She'd be proud of you. Claire's throat tightened. That's what I'm hoping. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. Me too. Lydia arrived just after 10, driving a dusty white SUV that looked like it hadn't seen the inside of a car wash in a decade. Claire met her in the driveway. Still allergic to washing your car, I see. Lydia grinned and opened her arms. Still allergic to hugs, I see. Claire laughed despite herself and let her cousin wrap her up. When they stepped inside the inn, Lydia's eyes lit with emotion. God, it still smells like cinnamon and lavender. She never changed the recipe. They toured the rooms, sharing fragments of memory. The game of hide and seek in the linen closet. The time Edith let them host a secret tea party for imaginary guests. The summer Lydia got stung by a jellyfish, and Claire read her books until she stopped crying. The warmth began to return, slowly but sincerely. When they reached the parlor, Lydia paused in front of the fireplace. Is that a picture of her and... Claire nodded. Daniel. I always thought that was a story made up by the old-timers, Lydia murmured. You know, secret loves and scandal. Turns out some secrets are true. Lydia turned to her. And what about you? Claire frowned. What about me? Lydia looked toward the porch. That's Aiden Holt, isn't it? Claire didn't answer. I remember him, Lydia said. He used to carve hearts into the dock railings. Claire smiled despite herself. He hasn't changed much. He's changed enough to look at you like that. Claire's breath caught. You should keep him, Lydia said, lightly, brushing dust off a shelf. Claire didn't respond. But her heart pounded louder than any thunder. Later that afternoon, the three of them worked side by side in the dining room, removing old curtains and polishing the tall windows that overlooked the back garden. Claire climbed the step stool to adjust the curtain rod. Aiden held it steady while Lydia knelt to secure the baseboards. For a while, it was almost normal. Until Lydia said, So, is this place reopening? Claire hesitated. I don't know. Aiden glanced up. I came to sell it, Claire admitted. But now? Lydia stood. Now? Claire looked around the room, the light filtering through the clean windows, the crackle of energy that came with doing something worthwhile. Now I wonder what it would be like to stay. Aiden's gaze lingered on her. You'd run it? Maybe, Claire said. Renovate a few more rooms. Make it more modern. Keep the heart, though. Lydia smiled. You'd be good at it. But then she added, a little too casually, what about the city? Your career? Claire's stomach twisted. She'd spent so long defining herself by that life, by business cards and presentations, and climbing a ladder she never enjoyed. Letting it go wasn't just change, it was loss. "I'm still figuring that out," she said finally. Lydia nodded. Fair. But the tension had crept in, subtle and sharp. That evening, Lydia went out for dinner with a friend from town, and Claire and Aiden found themselves alone again. They sat on the front porch, wine glasses in hand, watching the stars blink to life. "You okay?" he asked. Claire swirled the wine. "I feel like I'm at a crossroads." Most people do when they're rebuilding something. She looked at him. This was supposed to be a quick fix, a flip. But it's not just the house. It's me. I'm being remade. Aiden was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You don't have to decide tonight." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're too good to me." "I'm not. I'm just tired of pretending I don't care." Claire turned to him. "So don't." He kissed her again, slow and sure, and sweeter than the sea breeze. And for a moment, nothing else mattered. But the next morning, reality struck. Claire's phone buzzed just after sunrise, with an unfamiliar number. She answered groggily. "Hello?" "Claire Delaney, this is Evan Stein from Brightmark Creative." She sat up straighter. "Oh, yes, hi. We saw your consulting profile and portfolio online. Impressive work. We'd like to talk to you about a possible long-term contract, hybrid structure, high-end clients." Claire blinked. Wow. Okay. "Are you still based in Boston?" Her breath caught. She looked out the window toward the misty lawn, the inn glowing gold in the early light. Aiden's truck parked beneath the cedar trees. "I'm not sure," she said finally. "Well, we'd love to schedule an interview." She gave him her email and ended the call, then sat there, stunned. Because suddenly, the road she thought she'd abandoned had come looking for her again, and she didn't know if she was supposed to follow it. That evening, she told Aiden on the porch. He was quiet for a long time. "Big opportunity," he said. "Maybe." He didn't look at her. "You going to take it?" "I don't know." He nodded once and said nothing more, which hurt more than yelling ever could. Chapter 8. The Last Letter. The air felt too still the next morning. Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen, one hand wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea she'd forgotten to drink. The call from Brightmark echoed in her mind, bouncing off the walls like a ghost. High-end clients. Long-term contract. A return to the Claire who used to know what she wanted. But when she looked out the window and saw the freshly painted porch rail, the mended shutters, the garden beds Aiden had rebuilt by hand, she didn't feel clarity. She felt torn in half. Lydia padded into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. You look like someone ran over your favorite sweater. Claire glanced over. It's been a long couple of days. Job offer? Claire nodded. Boston, creative consulting. The kind of role people kill for. And? Claire sighed. And I don't know if it's still what I want. Lydia reached into the cupboard for a mug. That's allowed, you know, changing. Not when your entire identity is wrapped in it. Lydia poured coffee. Then maybe it's time for a new identity. Claire stared at her cousin. You think I'm crazy if I stay, don't you? I think you'd be crazy to leave just because you feel like you're supposed to. Claire sank into a chair. I don't know how to make this choice. Maybe you don't need to choose yet, Lydia said gently. Maybe you just need to listen. The attic held its breath as Claire climbed the narrow staircase one more time. Aiden was out on a job across town. Lydia had gone to the bookstore. The inn creaked in the wind, familiar and waiting. Claire knelt beside the old trunk in the corner. She'd gone through it already. Pages, photos, Edith's corsage. But something about it still called to her. She opened the trunk again, this time emptying it completely. And there, tucked in the false bottom, beneath the cedar slats, was one final envelope. Smaller, heavier. On the front, to be opened when you no longer know who you are. Claire's throat tightened. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single letter and a small brass key. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then you've come to a moment I remember well. The edge, the place between what was and what could be. I stood there once too. I was 29. Danielle had left. The inn was falling apart. I had no husband, no career, and a child depending on me to be strong. So I built a life with what I had. And when I faltered, because I did, I reminded myself of two things. One, the world will always try to pull you toward safety. Two, the heart will always try to pull you toward truth. Listen to the one that feels like a deep breath. This key opens the old bench by the garden. Your grandfather built it. I hid something there for you. Not an answer, but something close. With all the love in my bones, Edith. Claire pressed the letter to her chest. Then she ran. The garden bench sat beneath the old crabapple tree, its paint chipped, its slats weathered. Claire had sat there as a child, tracing names etched into the wood. Now she found the tiny lock beneath the middle board. The brass key slid in with a soft click. Inside the compartment, a velvet pouch, she opened it. Inside was a delicate gold necklace, a locket. She opened it to find two photos, one of a young Edith, eyes alight with laughter, the other of Claire, age 4, clinging to her grandmother's legs at the shore. and folded behind the photos, a note. You are the love story I never got to finish. Make yours count. Claire sat on the bench, wind tugging her hair, heart pounding. She didn't have all the answers, but she had a map now, and a reason to follow it. Aiden returned late in the afternoon, sunburned and quiet. Claire met him on the back porch. "Can we talk?" she asked. He leaned against the railing. "You make a decision?" "Not exactly." Aiden nodded. "Okay." Claire swallowed. "I found another letter." His eyes lifted. She handed it to him. He read it slowly, mouth a firm line, then folded it and held it in both hands. "She loved you," he said. Claire nodded. "She saw me, even when I didn't know who I was." Aiden looked at her. "Do you know now?" She met his eyes. "I know I'm tired of chasing things that don't hold me. I know I want my life to mean something. And I know this place, this us, feels like a beginning, not an end." He stepped toward her. "So stay." "I want to, but not because I'm hiding from my old life." "You're not," he said. "You're finally stepping into your real one." She reached for his hand. "The job offer is still there, but I don't want to leave. Not now." Aiden touched her cheek. "Then don't." They kissed, deeper this time. A promise. A homecoming. That night, Claire brought out the letters, Edith's full collection, and began to organize them into a manuscript, a memoir, a love story, a history not erased but reclaimed. Lydia read them aloud beside her. Aiden brought them tea and folded himself into the couch cushions as if he'd always belonged there. And Claire thought, this is what the end of running feels like. Not collapse, but arrival. Chapter 9. What we left behind. The air had changed. It wasn't just the weather, though spring was edging into early summer, and the scent of honeysuckle now drifted through the windows. It was something subtler. The inn didn't creak the same way. The light fell through the windows, like it belonged there. And Claire felt different too. She stood at the edge of the upstairs hallway, a stack of fresh linens in her arms, watching the way the morning sun touched the banister. The house was cleaner, quieter, more itself than it had been in years. And so was she. Downstairs, she could hear Lydia humming as she sorted through Edith's old recipe cards. In the garden, Aiden's hammer struck steady and sure, finishing repairs on the bench beneath the crabapple tree. Claire closed her eyes. A few months ago, she'd been drowning in the silence of a cold high-rise, her heart wrapped in paperwork and deadlines. Now she breathed in the scent of sea air and lemon balm and felt something close to peace. And yet, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Claire didn't need to look. She knew it was Evan Stein. The job offer was still open. Her resume still glittered in the inboxes of people who hadn't seen her in years, but remembered the sharp, polished woman who wore heels like armor and used strategy decks like shields. Claire carried the linens into the rose room and set them down on the window seat. She opened her grandmother's journal again, the one she'd nearly finished transcribing, and reread the last entry. I didn't leave, he did, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd gone anyway. If I'd walked away from the inn, from the safety, and said, I want more than what the world thinks I should have. Would I have been happier? Or just lonelier, in prettier places? Claire closed the book and stared at the ceiling. She'd always thought leaving was the only way to grow. But maybe staying was a different kind of courage. That afternoon, Claire and Aiden drove out to the bluff where they used to sit as teenagers. The view stretched wide, ocean and sky, and the distant speck of the harbor, calm under the sunlight. Claire sat on a flat rock and pulled her knees to her chest. I was scared, she said quietly. Aiden didn't pretend not to understand. I know, he said. Back then, I thought if I stayed, I'd become her. Your mom? Claire nodded. Resentful, small. I thought she hated this town and that it had shrunk her. Aiden was silent for a moment. Maybe it did, he said finally. Or maybe she never found the parts of it that made her feel alive. Claire glanced at him. She didn't have you, he added softly. Claire's heart squeezed. He reached over and took her hand. I'm not going to ask you to stay. I know, but I want you to want to. Claire turned toward the sea. I don't know what the future looks like, but for the first time, I want to find out with someone. Aiden gave a small smile. I'll take that. They sat together in the wind, no more confessions left to give. Just truth, quiet and steady as the tide. Back at the inn, the final touches were falling into place. Claire had hired a local painter to restore the front sign. It now read, The Blue Heron Inn, established in 1953. The lettering elegant and deep blue. The front rooms were ready. The kitchen gleamed. The guest rooms had been aired out and softened, with Edith's old quilts and fresh flowers Lydia arranged in mason jars. Claire stood in the parlor with a clipboard, ticking off items. It felt strange and deeply right to be organizing check-ins and menu plans and linen deliveries. She turned to Aiden. You think it's too soon? He gave her a bemused look. You've only renovated half a historic inn in 6 weeks. She smiled. I meant to reopen, to stay, to commit. He stepped closer, his voice low. Nothing you do slowly feels rushed to me. Claire reached for his hand. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then you've been spending time with the wrong people. Maybe I'm done with that. He squeezed her hand. I hope so. The next morning, Claire drove to Boston. not to pack up her old life, but to say goodbye to it. She met with Evan Stein in a sleek cafe near the financial district. He wore cufflinks and a smile like a sales pitch. "We'd love to have you," he said, sliding a contract across the table. "The team needs a strong lead, and your name still carries a lot of weight." Claire picked up the folder. She didn't open it. "I appreciate the offer," she said gently, "but I'm not coming back." Evan blinked. "Claire, I'm building something else now," she said. "Not just an inn. A life that doesn't make me hate waking up." He laughed uneasily. "You really left for a bed and breakfast?" Claire smiled. "I left for peace, and I found love." Evan paused, then shrugged. "Your loss." Claire stood. "Actually, I think it's the opposite." She left the cafe without looking back. The first guest checked in on a Tuesday. An older couple, traveling the coast in a rented convertible, charmed by the handwritten sign that said "Reopening with Stories. Welcome home." Claire handed them their keys and a basket of Edith's lemon cookies. Aiden watched from the kitchen, pretending to sort tools, but mostly just smiling. Lydia arranged flowers on the dining room table and lit the candles Edith once saved for special occasions. Claire stood in the doorway and felt it. The house was alive again, and so was she. That night, she and Aiden sat on the garden bench under the stars. The locket still hung around her neck. "You know," she said softly, "my grandmother never got her happy ending." Aiden wrapped an arm around her. "Maybe this is it. Maybe we're her ending." Claire smiled. "No," she said. "We're just the beginning." Chapter 10. The Cove is Home. The morning sun rose pink and gold over the water, soft as a whisper. Claire stood barefoot on the porch of the Blue Heron Inn, coffee warming her palms, listening to the hush of waves against the shore. The tide was low, the air sweet with salt and budding lilacs. A sea breeze fluttered the hem of her robe as gulls wheeled lazily above the cliffs. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she didn't feel like she was chasing her life. She was living it. Behind her, the inn stirred gently. Floorboards creaked, a kettle whistled. Lydia's light footsteps padded across the upstairs hallway as she prepared for breakfast service. From the back garden came the faint clatter of Aiden's tools. He was fixing the east trellis, the one Edith had always wanted to rebuild. Claire smiled. She could still hear her grandmother's voice. Never loud, never sharp, just warm, firm, unapologetically honest. "Don't let the world talk you out of your own joy, sweetheart." Claire had let it for too long, not anymore. They held the soft opening that afternoon. No grand event, no ribbon cutting, just a quiet announcement posted on the town's bulletin board, a few calls to old family friends, and one chalkboard sign by the edge of the main road that read, "Now open, the Blue Heron Inn. Stories, sea breezes, second chances." The town came in waves. Mrs. Loring from the cafe brought a lemon tart. The Clarks brought their golden retriever, who promptly fell asleep in the shade of the front porch. Gwen Mallory even brought her own jam, which no one ate, but everyone admired politely. The rooms weren't full, but they didn't need to be. Not yet. The inn glowed that evening, full of laughter and a soft light. The air smelled of rosemary, wood smoke, and possibility. Claire moved through the dining room in a flowing sundress, barefoot again, just like Edith used to be when summer crept through the floorboards. She caught Lydia's eye, and they smiled at each other, peaceful, proud. And when she looked out through the open French doors and saw Aiden on the back patio, watching her with that steady, anchored gaze, she felt more seen than she ever had in her life. Later, when the guests had retired and the candles burned low, Aiden took her hand and led her outside. They walked the garden path in silence, their fingers laced, the night wrapping around them like a secret. When they reached the crabapple bench, he pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small, wrapped box. Claire looked at him warily. "Is this a bribe? I'm not doing the dishes again tonight." He smiled and handed it to her. Inside, a necklace, a tiny silver charm shaped like a key. Claire's breath caught. "I had it made," Aiden said softly. "It doesn't open anything, but I thought maybe it could be a symbol that you have the key to this place, to me, to your life now." Her hands trembled. "Aiden." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But I'd be a fool if I didn't tell you that you changed everything, just by coming back." Claire blinked away tears. "I spent years trying to become someone else," she whispered. "But I think I was always meant to come home. Not because I failed, because I needed to remember who I was before the world told me who I should be." Aiden brushed her cheek with his thumb. "And who's that?" Claire smiled. "A woman who finally knows what it means to stay." He kissed her then. Beneath the starlight and wind, the scent of honeysuckle and sea all around them, it wasn't the kind of kiss that marked a beginning. It was the kind that was the beginning. A week later, the local paper ran a story. "The Blue Heron reopens. A love story restored." They talked about the renovations, the community volunteers, and the hidden letters discovered beneath floorboards, Claire's decision to share excerpts through the Driftwood Cove Historical Society's summer exhibit. They didn't mention Aiden by name, but the photo showed them on the porch together, her hand tucked gently into his, a strand of her hair caught in the breeze. Claire's mother called after reading the article. "I was hard on you," she said, voice softer than Claire remembered it ever being. "I was hard on myself," Claire replied. They talked for almost an hour. Not everything was resolved, but it was a start, and that was enough. Claire's days found a rhythm. early mornings in the kitchen with Lydia, baking muffins and scrambling eggs, guest check-ins, laundry rotations, bookkeeping she didn't mind anymore. Aiden came and went, fixing, building, sometimes simply lingering. He moved into the carriage house out back a month later. For now, he said. Claire didn't press. She didn't need promises written in stone. She had something better. A love built, plank by plank, sunrise by sunrise. Something weathered, but true. Some nights, they sat together on the dock with their feet dangling above the water. Other nights, they read through more of Edith's journals, laughing or crying or simply holding hands. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, Claire swore she heard her grandmother's voice whispering across the tide, "You're exactly where you belong." The first summer Gis wrote in the logbook, "More than a bed, more than an inn, a home. We came here to escape. We left with hearts mended. Best lemon cookies on the East Coast. But even better, stories worth staying for." Claire read those words on a quiet evening and closed the book gently. She walked out to the garden where Aiden waited on the bench, watching fireflies blink to life under the low trees. She sat beside him, rested her head on his shoulder. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Above them, the stars turned slowly. Behind them, the inn stood strong. And all around them, the cove breathed steady and calm. The heart of a town, a legacy, a home. Thank you for spending the evening with Moonlit Romantic in the quiet corners of the Blue Heron Inn. We found that love doesn't always arrive on time, but when it returns, it knows exactly where to land. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Until next time, sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, sometimes coming back is the bravest thing of all.